In part 1, we witnessed a love story destroyed by lies. Julian Kim, ruthless alpha billionaire CEO, publicly humiliated his Omega husband Jamie at their 3rd anniversary, pouring wine over him in front of Seoul's elite. Why? Photographs his mother provided showed Jamie cheating with another alpha at a Busan hotel. But Jamie was innocent. The photos captured Ethan Park, Jamie's identical twin brother, separated at birth. A brother Jamie never knew existed. Mrs. Kim had orchestrated everything, hiring investigators to photograph Ethan, knowing the resemblance would destroy the low-born Omega she'd always despised. For 5 weeks, Jamie suffered. Bond sickness ravaged his body as Julian rejected him, paraded replacement Omegas through Seoul's social circuit, and closed every door in his face. Jamie lost his business, his reputation, his health, everything except his dignity. By the time Julian discovered the truth at the Seoul Tech Summit, when he confronted Ethan face to face, it was too late. Jamie's plane to New York had already taken off. Julian collapsed at gate 24, watching his innocent mate disappear into the night sky. The most powerful alpha in Korea was powerless to stop the Omega he'd destroyed from choosing survival over their shattered bond. Now, 3 months later, Jamie has built a new life in New York, far from the alpha who broke him, far from the bond that nearly killed him. His healing. Growing stronger. Learning what it means to be cherished instead of destroyed. But Julian Kim doesn't accept defeat. And Mrs. Kim's manipulation is about to face consequences neither she nor Julian saw coming. Part 2 asks the questions that will tear your heart apart. Can broken bonds be mended? Can trust be rebuilt after such betrayal? Does Jamie even want the alpha who destroyed him, or has he found something better? Welcome to the redemption arc Julian doesn't deserve, but will fight hell itself to earn. 3 months in New York had taught Jamie Park what survival looked like. His apartment in Brooklyn was small, a 4th-floor walk-up in Park Slope with windows that rattled when the subway passed beneath the street. Nothing like the Hanam-dong penthouse with its floor-to-ceiling views of Seoul. But it was his. Paid for with money he'd saved before the world imploded, decorated with furniture from thrift stores and IKEA, filled with plants he'd somehow managed to keep alive. Small victories. Jamie lived on small victories now. He stood at his kitchen counter at 6 a.m., hands wrapped around a coffee mug, watching autumn sunlight paint Brooklyn's brownstones gold. The Bond scar on his neck, where Julian's mark had been, ached dully. It always ached. 3 months hadn't changed that. Omega biology didn't forget betrayal just because you crossed an ocean. But the pain was manageable now. Medication helped. Distance helped. Therapy with Dr. Rodriguez helped most of all. You're not broken, she told him in their first session, when he could barely speak without crying. You're healing from a catastrophic wound. There's a difference. Jamie had clung to that difference like a lifeline. His phone buzzed. A text from Ethan, his twin brother, the person whose existence had destroyed everything and somehow saved him too. Ethan, morning. Coffee this weekend? Want to hear about the NYC adventures? Jamie smiled, something that still felt foreign on his face. 3 months ago, he'd learned he had a twin. Now Ethan called weekly from Seoul, sent care packages, existed as proof that Jamie came from somewhere, belonged to someone, even if his alpha had thrown him away. Jamie, Sunday? There's a place in Williamsburg you'd love. Ethan, perfect. Miss you, brother. Brother. The words still made Jamie's chest tight with emotions he couldn't name. He showered, dressed in clothes that actually fit now, he'd regained some of the weight Bond sickness had stolen, and headed to his job at a small marketing consultancy in Manhattan. Nothing like the boutique agency he'd built in Seoul. But his new boss, Rachel, had hired him despite the gap in his resume, despite the vague explanations about relocating after personal circumstances. You're brilliant, she'd said after reviewing his portfolio. I don't care what happened in Korea. I care what you can do here. New York didn't know about wine-stained anniversaries or viral humiliation videos. New York didn't care about Seoul's class hierarchies or Kim family scandals. New York let Jamie be anonymous, let him rebuild himself brick by brick without an audience documenting his every failure. The morning passed in client meetings and campaign revisions. Jamie was good at his work, had always been good at his work, and losing Julian hadn't taken that away. Around noon, the persistent headache he'd been ignoring bloomed into something sharper. Bond pain. Real Bond pain, not the dull ache. He made it to the office bathroom before his knees buckled, one hand braced against the sink as the other pressed to his chest. 3 months and an ocean away, and Julian could still drop him to his knees with phantom pain from a bond that should have dissolved by now. Shit, Jamie whispered, breathing through it the way Dr. Martinez had taught him. His Omega specialist, another small miracle of New York, had explained that severed bonds sometimes took years to fully break, especially between fated mates. Some never broke at all. Jamie had stopped asking which category he fell into. The pain receded after 5 minutes. He splashed cold water on his face, checked his reflection, pale but functional, and returned to his desk. Rachel glanced up, concern flickering across her features, but didn't ask. She'd learned not to ask. After work, Jamie had an appointment at Mount Sinai Hospital. His weekly checkup with Dr. Marcus Chen, the Omega health specialist who'd literally saved his life when he'd collapsed at JFK 3 months ago, half dead from bond deterioration and neglect. The hospital's Omega Health Clinic was on the 7th floor, bright and modern and nothing like Korea's sterile medical facilities. Jamie checked in, settled into the waiting room with its soft chairs and gentle lighting designed to calm distressed Omegas. Jamie Park. A nurse called his name. He followed her back to examination room 3, where Dr. Chen was already reviewing his chart on a tablet. The alpha doctor looked up, his expression warming with genuine concern that still surprised Jamie every time. "How are you feeling this week?" Marcus asked, gesturing for Jamie to sit. His scent, sandalwood and rain, was carefully muted with suppressants, professional and non-threatening. Everything an alpha treating vulnerable Omegas should be. "Better," Jamie said honestly. "The nightmares are less frequent. I'm sleeping 4, sometimes 5 hours straight now." "That's real progress." Marcus's smile reached his eyes, kind eyes, warm in a way that didn't demand anything. "And the bond pain?" Jamie hesitated. "It spiked today. Around noon. 5 minutes, maybe." Marcus made a note, his expression thoughtful. "Any triggers you can identify?" Jamie shook his head. He never knew what triggered the spikes. Sometimes nothing. Sometimes everything. Sometimes just the memory of Julian's cold eyes as he poured wine over his head in front of 300 witnesses. Julian Kim had not slept in 73 days. His penthouse in Hanam-dong felt like a mausoleum. Every room held ghosts, Jamie making coffee in the kitchen, Jamie laughing on the balcony, Jamie curled against him on the couch with his head tucked under Julian's chin, breathing in that vanilla and white tea scent that meant home. All gone. All destroyed by Julian's own hands. He stood in his home office at 3 a.m., staring at the evidence spread across his desk. Ethan's statement, authenticated and notarized. The private investigator's full report with its damning notation, no actual misconduct observed. Security footage from the Busan Hotel showing exactly what Ethan had described, professional interactions cropped into apparent betrayal. And the background check from 3 years ago, the one that mentioned Jamie's twin brother in a single buried line. The one his mother had seen and deliberately hidden. Mrs. Kim had orchestrated everything. Julian's hands shook as he poured his 4th whiskey of the night. The alcohol did nothing. Nothing touched the howling void in his chest where his bond used to live. Severed bonds hurt alphas too, not with the physical devastation Omegas suffered, but with a psychological agony that felt like losing a limb you could still feel. He tried everything to reach Jamie. Called the disconnected number 200 times. Tracked him to New York through resources that bent privacy laws. Discovered Jamie was alive, working, existing in Brooklyn like Julian hadn't destroyed him. But Jamie wouldn't answer his calls. Wouldn't read his emails. Had blocked him on every platform and built a wall Julian's money and power couldn't penetrate. Good. Jamie should hate him. Julian hated himself enough for both of them. His phone buzzed. His mother, calling for the 4th time tonight. Julian stared at her name on the screen with something that transcended rage into cold, lethal clarity. He answered. "Julian, finally." Mrs. Kim's voice carried its usual imperious tone. We need to discuss the merger with Hanwhat. Your absence from the last 2 board meetings is becoming. I know what you did. Silence. Then, carefully, I don't know what you mean. Ethan Park. Julian's voice was ice over steel. Jamie's identical twin brother. The one you knew about for 3 years. The one you had photographed in Busan, knowing I'd think it was Jamie. The one whose existence you deliberately hid so you could destroy my mate when the opportunity arose. More silence. Julian could picture her face, calculating, assessing whether denial or justification would serve better. She chose justification. That Omega was ruining you, she said coldly. Dragging our family name through association with his lowborn background. You were too blinded by bond instinct to see it. I did what any mother would do, protected her son from a catastrophic mistake. Julian's grip on his phone tightened until the case cracked. You orchestrated the destruction of an innocent person. You hired investigators to stalk Jamie's twin. You manipulated photographic evidence. You presented it as irrefutable proof knowing it was a lie. And when I publicly humiliated him, when I rejected our bond, when I paraded other Omegas in front of Seoul's cameras to hurt him, you watched and did nothing. I watched you reclaim your dignity, Mrs. Kim corrected. I watched you remember who you are. A Kim. Not some lovesick alpha controlled by an opportunistic Omega. Jamie almost died. Julian's voice broke on the words. Bond sickness nearly killed him because of what you made me do. What I did. He's in New York now, half a world away, because staying in Korea meant watching his mate, his fated mate, destroy him repeatedly for a crime he didn't commit. He'll recover. Omegas are resilient. The casual dismissal, the complete absence of remorse, snapped something fundamental in Julian's chest. You're done, he said quietly. I'm removing you from the Kim Industries board effective immediately. Your advisory position, terminated. Your access to family accounts, frozen. The Pyeongchang estate, the one grandfather left you? I'm exercising the family charter clause. You're no longer welcome there. You can't. I'm the majority shareholder and CEO. I absolutely can. Julian's voice carried alpha command that made even his mother pause. But that's just the financial part. Tomorrow morning, I'm holding a press conference. I'm going to tell Seoul's elite exactly what you did. The manipulation. The fabricated evidence. The destruction of an innocent Omega to satisfy your classist prejudices. Julian, if you do this, you'll destroy our family's reputation. You already did that when you made me into a monster. Julian's hand was steady now, purpose crystallizing from rage. The difference is I'm willing to face consequences. You never have been. Your father is dead, and would be ashamed of what you've become. Julian ended the call. He sat in the darkness of his office, surrounded by evidence of his mother's manipulation and his own catastrophic failure. The press conference was scheduled for 10 a.m. His lawyers had the documentation prepared. By tomorrow afternoon, everyone who'd whispered about Jamie's infidelity would know the truth. It wouldn't fix anything. Wouldn't heal Jamie. Wouldn't restore what Julian had destroyed. But it was a start. And if Julian spent the rest of his life making amends for 5 weeks of cruelty, it still wouldn't be enough. Dr. Marcus Chen had kind eyes. That was the first thing Jamie noticed 3 months ago when he'd woken up in Mount Sinai's ICU, more dead than alive, his body shutting down from bond rejection. Marcus had been there, calm, professional, explaining in gentle tones that Jamie's Omega biology was in crisis but that he was safe now, that they would help him heal. Jamie hadn't believed him. Hadn't believed he could heal, could survive, could be anything other than the broken Omega his alpha had publicly destroyed. But Marcus had been patient. Now, sitting in the examination room for his weekly checkup, Jamie watched Marcus review his latest blood work with focused attention. The alpha was handsome in an understated way, sharp features softened by wire-rimmed glasses, black hair perpetually slightly messy, tall but not imposing. He wore his white coat like armor against the world, but his scent, sandalwood and rain, radiated calm. Your cortisol levels are improving, Marcus said, looking up with a smile. Significantly. Whatever you're doing, the therapy, the routine, the distance, it's working. Your body is finally starting to relax. It doesn't always feel that way, Jamie admitted. The bond pain today is normal for severed fated bonds. Marcus set the tablet aside, his full attention on Jamie now. That was another thing Jamie had learned. Marcus listened. Actually listened, like Jamie's words mattered, like his experience was valid. Especially when the bond was rejected rather than mutually dissolved. It can take years. Some bonds never fully break. Jamie's chest tightened. So I'm just supposed to live with this forever? Random pain spikes that drop me to my knees when I'm trying to work. Not forever. The frequency and intensity will decrease over time. Marcus hesitated, then added carefully, unless you're still bonded. I'm not. Jamie's voice was sharper than he intended. He rejected me. Publicly. Repeatedly. That breaks a bond. Physical rejection doesn't always break a fated bond, Jamie. You know this. Marcus's tone was gentle, not pushing, just stating facts. Your alpha would have to actively sever the connection, or you'd have to undergo the medical procedure to remove his mark completely. Based on your scans, neither has happened. Jamie's hand moved unconsciously to his neck, to the scar tissue where Julian's claiming bite had been. The mark had faded but not disappeared. Some nights Jamie could still feel phantom teeth breaking his skin, the moment Julian had bonded them under cherry blossoms 3 years ago. I can't go back, Jamie whispered. Even if the bond isn't completely broken. I can't, I won't. I'm not suggesting you should. Marcus leaned forward, his expression earnest. You have agency here, Jamie. Always. I'm just explaining the medical reality so you understand why your body responds the way it does. The bond remembers even when you're trying to forget. Jamie blinked back the burn of tears. 3 months in New York and he still cried too easily. I hate that he still has this power over me. That he can hurt me from thousands of miles away without even trying. Then we work on managing it better. Marcus pulled out a prescription pad. I'm increasing your suppressants slightly. Not to numb you, you've done enough numbing, but to give you more stability. And I want you to start attending the Omega support group here at the hospital. Other people who've survived bond trauma. You're not alone in this. Other people. Other Omegas who'd been betrayed, rejected, destroyed by alphas they trusted. The thought of sharing his story with strangers made Jamie's stomach twist, but Marcus's steady gaze held something like hope. Okay, Jamie agreed quietly. I'll try. That's all I ask. Marcus smiled, and something in Jamie's chest loosened fractionally. You're doing better than you think, Jamie. 3 months ago, you could barely walk across this room. Now you're working full-time, rebuilding your life, making actual plans for your future. That's not nothing. Jamie managed a small smile. Dr. Rodriguez says the same thing in therapy. Dr. Rodriguez is a smart woman. Marcus stood, indicating the appointment was over, but then hesitated. Actually, before you go, this is probably completely inappropriate and you should absolutely say no if it makes you uncomfortable, but would you want to get coffee sometime? Not as your doctor. Just as someone who'd like to know you better. Jamie's breath caught. Marcus's scent carried the faint chemical signature of nervousness despite his outward calm. He was asking Jamie out. An alpha was asking him out, not demanding, not assuming, not taking, asking, with full permission to refuse built into the invitation. Coffee, Jamie repeated, testing the word. Or tea. Or a walk in Prospect Park. Whatever feels comfortable. Marcus's ears had gone slightly red. And if this is too much too soon, please forget I said anything. Your well-being is more important than my. Coffee would be nice, Jamie interrupted softly. Not this week. Maybe next weekend? I need time to process. Marcus's smile was brilliant, unguarded in a way his professional demeanor usually wasn't. Next weekend. Whenever you're ready. No pressure, Jamie. Never pressure. Never pressure. The words echoed as Jamie left the hospital, stepping into crisp autumn air that tasted like possibility. An alpha who asked instead of took. Who respected boundaries instead of steamrolling them. Who saw Jamie's trauma and didn't run, didn't minimize, didn't blame. Jamie pulled out his phone and opened his blocked contacts. Julian's name sat there, blocked for 3 months, dozens of missed calls and unread messages piling up behind digital walls. His finger hovered over unblock for a long moment. Then he closed the app and walked toward the subway. Some walls existed for a reason. Julian Kim landed at JFK International at 6 p.m. on a Friday, 3 months and 2 weeks after watching Jamie's plane disappear into the Seoul night sky. He'd held out for 2 weeks after the press conference, the one that had detonated through Seoul's elite like a tactical nuke. His mother's manipulation exposed. The fabricated evidence laid bare. Jamie's innocence proven to every person who'd called him a cheating Omega, who'd whispered behind their hands, who'd abandoned his business like rats fleeing a sinking ship. Mrs. Kim had been socially executed. Removed from every board, uninvited from every event, her name now synonymous with cruelty and deception. Julian had made sure of it. But Jamie still wouldn't answer his calls. So Julian had done what desperate alphas with unlimited resources did. He tracked Jamie to Brooklyn, hired investigators to monitor him from a distance, collected information like a man possessed. Not to hurt him. Never to hurt him again. Just to know he was alive. Breathing. Surviving. The reports had been clinical. Subject maintains regular schedule. Employment at Morgan & Associates Marketing confirmed. Residence, Park Slope, Brooklyn. No signs of distress. Subject appears to be adapting well to relocation. But reports weren't enough. Julian needed to see Jamie with his own eyes, needed to confirm his Omega was truly alive and not just existing in some pain-numbed half-life like Julian was. He checked into the Mark Hotel on the Upper East Side and spent the evening reviewing the surveillance photos his people had compiled. Jamie walking to the subway. Jamie buying coffee at a corner shop. Jamie sitting in Prospect Park with a book, autumn sunlight catching his silver blonde hair. Alive. Healthy. The weight he'd lost was returning. The hollow look in his eyes, the one Julian had put there, seemed less pronounced. Julian's Bond scar ached with longing so intense it felt like dying. Saturday morning, he positioned himself at a cafe across from Jamie's apartment building. Waited. Watched. His heart in his throat every time the building's door opened. At 9:47 a.m., Jamie emerged. Julian's breath stopped completely. 3 months. It had been 3 months since he'd seen Jamie in person, and the sight of him now, whole, walking, alive, made Julian's alpha instinct scream with need. He wore jeans and a cream sweater, his hair longer now, unstyled but beautiful. He carried a messenger bag slung across his body and moved with purpose, not the defeated shuffle of those final weeks in Seoul. Julian stood to follow, keeping careful distance. He'd promised himself he wouldn't approach. Wouldn't speak. Would just confirm Jamie was truly okay and then leave him in peace. Let him heal without Julian's presence contaminating his recovery. Jamie walked 3 blocks to a small coffee shop called Brew Haven. Through the window, Julian watched him order, watched the barista smile at him like he was a regular, watched Jamie smile back, a real smile, small but genuine. Then another man entered the cafe. Tall. Alpha. Asian American, maybe early 30s, wearing a casual jacket and wire-rimmed glasses. He spotted Jamie immediately, his entire face lighting up with warmth. Jamie's expression transformed when he saw him, surprise melting into something soft, something that looked dangerously close to happiness. Julian's world tilted. He watched through the window as the alpha, this stranger who looked at Jamie like he was precious, approached. Watched Jamie's body language, the way he didn't tense, didn't shrink, didn't prepare for violence. The alpha said something that made Jamie laugh. Actually laugh, the sound inaudible through glass but visible in the way his shoulders shook, in the hand he brought up to cover his mouth. When was the last time Julian had made Jamie laugh like that? Before the party. Before the wine. Before Julian had believed lies over their bond and destroyed everything good in his life. The alpha gestured to a table by the window. Jamie nodded. They sat, and Julian watched from across the street as this stranger, this interloper who had no right to Jamie's smiles, leaned forward with obvious interest while Jamie talked. The alpha's attention never wavered. Never checked his phone. Never looked away. He listened like Jamie's words were the only thing that mattered in the universe. The way Julian used to listen, before his mother's poison and his own arrogance had corrupted everything. A barista brought their drinks. The alpha said something that made Jamie's smile widen. Then, and this was the moment that carved Julian's heart from his chest, the alpha reached across the table and gently touched Jamie's hand. Just his fingertips against Jamie's wrist. A question, not a demand. Jamie didn't pull away. Julian's hands clenched into fists. Every alpha instinct he possessed screamed at him to storm in there, to drag Jamie away from this stranger, to remind him who his mate was, who had claimed him first, who would fight anyone who dared touch what belonged to. No. Julian forced himself to breathe. Forced himself to see what was actually happening. Jamie wasn't being taken. Jamie was choosing. Choosing to sit with this alpha, choosing to smile at him, choosing to let himself be treated with gentleness instead of cruelty. Choosing someone who probably asked before touching, who respected boundaries, who saw Jamie's trauma and didn't run. Everything Julian should have been. Everything Julian had failed to be. Through the window, Jamie threw his head back laughing at something the alpha said, his neck exposed, the faded mark of Julian's claim barely visible above his sweater collar. And Julian realized with devastating clarity that Jamie looked lighter. Freer. Happier without his bonded alpha than he'd been in those final weeks with him. Julian had spent 3 months telling himself he could fix this. Could apologize enough, grovel enough, prove he'd changed enough. Could win Jamie back through sheer force of will and unlimited resources. But watching Jamie smile at another alpha, smile without fear, without pain, without the weight of Julian's betrayal crushing him, Julian understood the terrible truth. Jamie was better off without him. And loving Jamie meant letting him stay that way. Julian turned away from the cafe window, his vision blurring. His phone buzzed, his assistant asking about Monday's meetings. Soul calling him back to a life that felt pointless without his Omega in it. But Jamie had built a new life. A better life. One that didn't include the alpha who destroyed him. Julian should leave. Should fly back to Seoul. Should let Jamie heal in peace. He should. But Julian Kim had never been good at accepting defeat. And he'd already destroyed Jamie once through arrogance and faithlessness. He wouldn't compound that sin by walking away when Jamie deserved, at minimum, to hear the full truth from the alpha who'd betrayed him. Even if that truth set Jamie free forever. Julian waited outside Jamie's apartment building until sunset. He'd watched Jamie and the other alpha, whose name Julian's investigators had identified as Dr. Marcus Chen, an Omega health specialist at Mount Sinai, part ways after 2 hours at the cafe. Jamie had walked home alone, and Julian had followed at a distance, his heart hammering with every step. Now he stood on the sidewalk as October darkness fell over Brooklyn, rehearsing words that felt inadequate. I'm sorry. I was wrong. I destroyed everything. Please let me explain. None of it was enough. Nothing would ever be enough. But he had to try. At 7:23 p.m., Jamie emerged from his building in different clothes, dark jeans and a leather jacket Julian had never seen. He looked up at the early stars, breathed deeply like he was savoring his freedom, and turned toward the street. He froze when he saw Julian. For 3 seconds, neither of them moved. Jamie's face cycled through shock, disbelief, and then something that made Julian's chest constrict, pure, glacial fury. No. Jamie's voice was steady, cold. Absolutely not. He turned and walked in the opposite direction. Julian followed. Jamie, please. I just need 5 minutes. You don't get minutes. Jamie didn't look back, his pace increasing. You don't get seconds. You don't get anything from me. I know I have no right to ask. Then don't. Jamie spun around so suddenly Julian nearly collided with him. Up close, Julian could see his Omega more clearly, the faded Bond scar on his neck, the shadows under his eyes that 3 months hadn't completely erased, the way his hands trembled despite his controlled voice. What are you doing here, Julian? What could you possibly think gives you the right to show up in my city, outside my home, after what you did to me? I know the truth. Julian's voice cracked. I know about Ethan. I know my mother orchestrated everything. I know you were innocent, and I destroyed you anyway. Jamie, I'm so. You're sorry? Jamie's laugh was sharp, humorless. You're sorry. 3 months later, you're sorry. Did it take you 3 months to figure out basic human decency? Or did it just take you that long to realize you actually lost something you wanted? The words hit like physical blows. I held a press conference. I exposed what my mother did. I made sure all of Seoul knows you were innocent. I don't care about Seoul. Jamie's control finally fractured, his voice rising. I don't care about your press conference or your mother's social execution or your guilt. Do you know what you did to me? Do you have any concept of what those 5 weeks felt like? Julian's throat closed. Jamie. You poured wine over my head in front of 300 people. You called me a whore. You cut off my phone, you had security throw me out of your building, you watched me beg in the rain and you closed your curtains and walked away. Jamie's voice shook, but his eyes blazed. I almost died, Julian. Bond sickness nearly killed me because my alpha, my fated mate, the person who was supposed to protect me, decided I was disposable based on photographs you never even questioned. I was wrong. You paraded other Omegas through Seoul's social circuit like I was already dead. Jamie's composure shattered completely now, tears streaming down his face. Every photo of your hand on someone else's waist felt like you were killing me all over again. And you knew it. You knew I'd see them. You wanted me to hurt. That wasn't a mistake, Julian. That was cruelty. Julian's vision blurred. I know, and I can't, there's no apology that covers what I did. But please, just let me explain. Explain what? Jamie stepped closer, and Julian could smell him now, vanilla and white tea, the scent that had haunted him for 3 months, but sharper now, edged with pain and fury. That you trusted your manipulative mother over our bond? That you believed photographs over 3 years of me being faithful? That you threw me away the moment it was convenient? I thought you betrayed me. I didn't. Jamie's shout echoed down the Brooklyn street. I loved you. I built my entire life around being worthy of you, of your family, of Seoul's elite standards. I worked myself to exhaustion trying to be the Omega your mother would accept. And the second she provided evidence, false evidence, you threw me away like garbage. You're right. Julian's voice broke. You're completely right. I should have trusted you. I should have questioned the photos. I should have. Should have. Jamie wiped his eyes roughly. Your should-haves don't undo 3 months of hell. They don't erase Bond sickness. They don't rebuild my business or my reputation or my ability to sleep through the night without nightmares. Tell me how to fix it. Julian was begging now, openly, the most powerful alpha in Korea reduced to pleading on a Brooklyn sidewalk. Tell me what I need to do, and I'll do it. Anything. Everything. Jamie, please. There is no fixing this. Jamie's voice cracked. You can't fix destroyed trust. You can't fix a bond you systematically tore apart. You can't fix the fact that I looked you in the eyes and told you I was innocent, and you didn't believe me. I believe you now. Now. Jamie laughed bitterly. You believe me now that you have irrefutable evidence? Now that Ethan confirmed my story? You needed proof, Julian. You needed witnesses and documentation and a full investigation before you could trust your own mate. What does that say about us? What does that say about what you actually thought of me? Julian had no answer. No defense. Jamie was right about everything. I'm different now, Julian tried desperately. I've changed. I cut my mother off completely. I exposed her manipulation. I spent 3 months. 3 months drowning in guilt. Jamie's eyes were cold. I spent 3 months trying not to die. We're not the same, Julian. And I don't care if you've changed. I don't care if you're sorry. I don't care if you've spent every night since Gate 24 wishing you could take it back. A figure appeared at the end of the block. Dr. Marcus Chen, walking toward them with 2 coffee cups in hand. He spotted Jamie's tears and Julian's presence, and his expression hardened instantly. Jamie? Marcus's voice carried alpha protective instinct. Is everything all right? Jamie looked at Marcus, then back at Julian. Something shifted in his expression, a choice being made in real time. Everything's fine, Jamie said quietly, his eyes still on Julian. This person was just leaving. This person. Not my alpha. Not my mate. Not even Julian. This person. Julian felt something fundamental break in his chest. Jamie, please. Go back to Seoul, Julian. Jamie's voice was exhausted now, all the fire burned out. Go back to your empire and your guilt and your should-haves. I'm building something here. Something that doesn't include the alpha who destroyed me. He turned away and walked toward Marcus, who handed him a coffee cup and placed a protective hand on his shoulder. They walked away together, and Jamie didn't look back. Not even once. Julian stood alone on a Brooklyn street as October wind cut through his expensive coat, watching his Omega disappear for the second time in 3 months. This time, Jamie was choosing to walk away. And Julian had no one to blame but the broken alpha staring back at him in a darkened shop window. Mrs. Kim received the subpoena on a Tuesday morning, delivered by a process server who didn't care about her family name or social standing. She stood in the foyer of the Pyeongchang estate, the home that had been hers for 40 years, staring at legal documents that promised to dismantle everything she'd built. Kim Julian versus Kim Hyejin. Civil suit for fraud, defamation, and intentional infliction of emotional distress. Her son was suing her. This is absurd, she said into her phone, her attorney on the line. He can't possibly. He can, and he is. Her lawyer's voice carried none of its usual deference. Mr. Kim has compiled extensive evidence. The private investigator's report, authenticated testimony from Park Ethan, the original photographs with metadata proving manipulation, witness statements from the anniversary party. Mrs. Kim, this is comprehensive. I'm his mother. That's not a legal defense. Mrs. Kim hung up and immediately called her son. The call went to voicemail. She tried again. Voicemail. A third time. Finally, Julian answered. Mother. The coldness in that single word made her pause. She'd raised this alpha, had shaped him into a CEO worthy of the Kim name. He'd never spoken to her with such ice. Julian, this lawsuit is unnecessary. We can discuss this privately. No. His voice was flat, final. We're past private discussions. You orchestrated the destruction of an innocent Omega. You manipulated evidence. You watched me torture my mate for 5 weeks based on lies you created. There will be legal consequences. I was protecting you. You were protecting your prejudices. Julian's voice hardened further. You couldn't accept that I bonded with a lowborn Omega, so you manufactured a reason to destroy him. And when I believed you, when I publicly humiliated him, when I paraded other Omegas in front of Seoul's cameras, you sat back and enjoyed watching him suffer. He was unsuitable. He was innocent. Julian's shout made her flinch. He loved me. He was faithful. He built his entire life around being worthy of our family. And you destroyed him because his parents weren't rich enough for your standards. Julian, please. The lawsuit is just the beginning. His voice dropped to something lethal. I've already removed you from every board position. Frozen your accounts. Revoked your access to the Pyeongchang estate. You have 72 hours to vacate. I've contacted every social organization you belong to and provided them with evidence of your manipulation. The Shinsegae Foundation, the Seoul Arts Council, the Qingdam Social Club, they've all voted to revoke your memberships. Mrs. Kim's hand tightened on her phone. You're ruining me. I'm holding you accountable. Julian's tone was merciless. Something I should have done the moment you presented those photographs. I was weak then. I'm not weak anymore. I'm your mother. You stopped being my mother when you chose cruelty over my happiness. Julian's voice carried finality. Jamie almost died because of what you did. What we did. He's in New York now, trying to rebuild the life you and I destroyed. And while I can never fix what I did to him, I can make damn sure you face consequences for your part in it. Julian, please. Don't do this. Think about the family name. The family name? Julian laughed bitterly. You destroyed our family name when your manipulation became public. Soul's Elite already knows what you did. The press conference made sure of that. Now the courts will make sure there are legal consequences to match the social ones. If you pursue this lawsuit, You'll what? Fight me? With what resources? I control the family accounts. I own the properties. I have evidence that would hold up in any court in Korea. Julian paused. But here's what you don't understand, Mother. I'm not doing this because I think it will bring Jamie back. I'm doing this because it's right. Because you hurt someone I love, and there have to be consequences for that. He's poisoned you against your own family. He never said a word against you. Julian's voice cracked slightly. Not once. Even after everything, even when he was bond-sick and dying, Jamie never blamed you. He blamed himself. He thought he wasn't good enough, wasn't worthy enough, wasn't the right kind of Omega for the Kim family. That's what your prejudice did to him. Silence stretched between them. I'll see you in court, Julian said quietly. And Mother? Don't call me again. He hung up. Mrs. Kim stood in her foyer, staring at legal documents that promised her social execution. Her hands shook, not with fear, but with rage. How dare he? How dare that lowborn Omega's influence reach across an ocean and turn her son against her? She made another call. I need a lawyer. The best defamation attorney in Seoul. I don't care what it costs. But 3 firms turned her down. 4. 5. Her name was toxic now, her reputation destroyed by her own son's press conference. No prestigious firm wanted to be associated with the woman who'd fabricated evidence to destroy an innocent Omega. By Thursday, the Pyeongchang estate had been cleared of her belongings by Julian's staff. Her accounts showed exactly 500,000 won, barely enough for a month's modest rent. Everything else frozen pending the lawsuit's outcome. By Friday, the Seoul Social Register, the Bible of Korea's elite, had published an unprecedented notice. Mrs. Kim Hae-jin has been removed from all Seoul Social Register listings pending investigation into allegations of fraud and character defamation. The register maintains strict standards of ethical conduct for all members. By Saturday, she was living in a small apartment in Mapo-gu, surrounded by boxes and the ruins of a life built on prejudice and control. Her phone rang once that weekend. An unknown number. Mrs. Kim? A young voice, male, unfamiliar. Who is this? Ethan Park. Jamie's twin brother. A pause. I wanted you to know something. Jamie doesn't know I'm calling. He wouldn't approve. But I thought you should hear this from someone who shares his face. Mrs. Kim's jaw clenched. You almost killed him, Ethan continued quietly. Your manipulation, your lies, they put my brother in an ICU in New York, hooked up to machines, barely alive because his body was shutting down from bond rejection. I sat beside him for 3 days wondering if I'd found my twin just to watch him die. I never intended. You intended exactly that. Ethan's voice hardened. You wanted him gone. Well, congratulations. He's gone. He's across an ocean, rebuilding himself from nothing, and you're exactly where you belong. Alone. He hung up. Mrs. Kim sat in her empty apartment, surrounded by consequences she'd never imagined, and understood, finally, far too late, that some victories cost everything. Jamie's first date with Marcus was nothing like anything he'd experienced with Julian. They met at a small Italian restaurant in the West Village on a Wednesday evening, 2 weeks after Julian's appearance in Brooklyn. Marcus wore a navy sweater that made his eyes warm, and he'd brought Jamie a single white rose, not a dramatic bouquet, just one perfect flower. I wasn't sure if flowers were too much, Marcus admitted, his ears going slightly red. But you mentioned liking them in one of our sessions, and I thought. It's perfect, Jamie said softly, accepting the rose. Thank you. The dinner was easy. Comfortable. Marcus asked about Jamie's work, his favorite books, his thoughts on New York versus Seoul. He listened when Jamie talked, laughed at his stories, never once checked his phone or looked away. When the waiter brought wine, Marcus glanced at Jamie and quietly ordered tea instead, understanding without being told that wine carried too many painful memories. Small things. Marcus noticed small things. I have a confession, Marcus said over dessert, his expression turning serious. I've been wanting to ask you out since your second appointment. But I waited because you were my patient, and that would have been completely inappropriate. Even now, I'm worried I'm taking advantage. You're not, Jamie interrupted. Marcus, you saved my life. And you've never made me feel like I owed you anything for that. This, he gestured between them, this is my choice. Completely. Marcus's smile was relieved, genuine. Your choice. Always your choice, Jamie. That's important to me. Your choice. The words settled into Jamie's chest like something healing. They walked through Washington Square Park after dinner, autumn leaves crunching underfoot. Marcus maintained careful distance, close enough to talk, far enough to respect boundaries. When Jamie shivered in the October wind, Marcus offered his jacket without assuming he could drape it over Jamie's shoulders himself. I should tell you something, Jamie said as they paused near the fountain. My bonded alpha, my ex-alpha, is in New York. He showed up 2 weeks ago wanting to apologize. Marcus's expression shifted, professional concern bleeding through personal interest. How do you feel about that? Angry. Hurt. Confused. Jamie stared at the fountain's dancing water. I told him to leave, to go back to Seoul. But the bond, he pressed a hand to his chest. It's still there. Damaged but present. Sometimes I can feel him across the city, and it makes everything complicated. Do you want to reconcile with him? Marcus's voice was carefully neutral, but Jamie caught the tension in his shoulders. No. The answer came quickly, surely. What he did, what he put me through, I can't just forget that because he's sorry now. He destroyed me, Marcus. Publicly. Repeatedly. And he only cared after he had proof I was innocent. That's not love. That's guilt. But the bond makes you question yourself, Marcus said quietly. Every day. Jamie finally looked at Marcus, this kind alpha who asked instead of demanded, who respected instead of possessed, who saw Jamie's trauma and didn't run. The bond says he's my fated mate, that we're supposed to be together. But my mind, my heart, they remember being destroyed. They remember begging in the rain while he closed the curtains and walked away. Marcus reached out slowly, telegraphing his movement, and gently touched Jamie's hand. Fated bonds are powerful, Jamie. But they're not infallible. Biology doesn't account for cruelty, for betrayal, for broken trust. You're allowed to choose yourself over a bond that nearly killed you. Is that what you'd do? Jamie asked. If you were me? Marcus was quiet for a long moment. I'd be terrified. The bond would pull at me, making me question everything. Society would tell me fated mates are sacred, that I should forgive, that true bonds can overcome anything. He squeezed Jamie's hand gently. But I'd also remember what it felt like to be destroyed by someone who was supposed to protect me. And I'd ask myself, is biology enough to rebuild trust that was shattered so completely? What's the answer? I don't know, Marcus admitted. That's something only you can decide. They walked back toward Jamie's apartment in comfortable silence. At his building's entrance, Marcus stopped, maintaining his careful distance. I want to see you again, he said. But I also want you to have space to figure out what you need. No pressure, Jamie. If you need time, if you need to sort through your feelings about your bond, I understand. Jamie looked at this alpha who'd shown him nothing but kindness, who'd helped him heal without demanding anything in return, who was offering him a future without chains. Then his phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number, but Jamie knew who it was. Julian had somehow gotten his new number. Julian, I'm not giving up. I know I don't deserve forgiveness, but I'm not leaving New York until you hear the full truth. Please. Just one conversation. Jamie's chest tightened. Bond pain or emotional pain, he couldn't tell anymore. Marcus saw his expression change, saw him check the phone. Is it him? Marcus asked gently. Jamie nodded, unable to speak. What do you want to do? The question hung between them. What did Jamie want? The safe, kind alpha standing in front of him, offering patience and respect? Or the confrontation with the mate who destroyed him, the conversation that might bring closure or might just tear open wounds that had barely begun to heal? I don't know, Jamie whispered. Marcus, I don't know. Then take time to figure it out. Marcus stepped back, giving space. I'll be here when you decide. Whether that's tomorrow or 3 months from now or never. Your healing matters more than my feelings. He left before Jamie could respond, walking into the New York night like the gentleman he was. Jamie stood on his building steps, phone in hand, torn between two futures. His Bond scar ached. Julian was close, somewhere in the city, probably watching, waiting, hoping. The pull was magnetic, undeniable, biology screaming at him to find his alpha. But his mind remembered wine cascading down his face. His body remembered collapsing in the rain. His heart remembered begging for trust that never came. Another text arrived. Julian, I'm staying at the Mark Hotel. Room 1847. I'll wait as long as it takes. I love you, Jamie. I never stopped loving you. I just forgot how to show it. Jamie's finger hovered over the delete button. Then over the reply button. Then he closed his eyes, tears streaming down his face, and admitted the terrible truth to himself. Part of him, the broken, bond-sick, fated mate part, wanted to go to that hotel room. Wanted to hear Julian's apology. Wanted to believe that love could conquer what cruelty had destroyed. But the stronger part, the part that had survived, that had rebuilt, that had learned his worth in the ashes of Julian's betrayal, knew that walking into that hotel room might mean walking back into a cage he'd barely escaped. Marcus or Julian. Safety or fate. New beginning or second chance. Jamie couldn't choose. Not tonight. Maybe not ever. He went inside his apartment, curled up on his couch with Marcus's jacket still draped over his shoulders and Julian's texts burning into his phone screen, and let himself break down completely. Some choices were impossible. And some bonds refused to let go, no matter how much damage they'd caused. Julian stood before 500 people in the Grand Millennium Hotel ballroom, the same venue where he destroyed Jamie 3 months ago, and prepared to destroy himself instead. The room was packed. Seoul's elite had flown to New York for what Julian's press team had billed as a major announcement from Kim Industries. Business journalists filled the front rows. Cameras lined the back. His mother's former social circle sat in the middle, hungry for scandal. They were about to get more than they'd bargained for. Julian's hands shook as he approached the podium. No notes. No teleprompter. Just the truth he should have spoken months ago. 3 months ago, he began, his voice echoing through the ballroom, I stood in this hotel's sole location and committed an act of cruelty I can never take back. I poured wine over my Omega husband, Jamie Park, and publicly accused him of infidelity in front of 300 witnesses. That video went viral. Millions of people watched me destroy an innocent person based on manipulated evidence I never questioned. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Cameras focused tighter. I'm not here to make excuses. But I am here to provide context, because Seoul's elite, many of you in this room, participated in Jamie's destruction. You believed the narrative without question. You terminated business contracts with his agency. You whispered about low-born Omegas and their supposed nature. You treated him like garbage because a wealthy alpha said he was guilty. Julian's jaw clenched. Jamie Park was innocent. The photos showed his identical twin brother, Ethan Park, whose existence my mother deliberately hid so she could orchestrate Jamie's downfall. She hired private investigators. She manipulated evidence. She weaponized my prejudices and insecurities to destroy an Omega she deemed unsuitable for the Kim family name. He paused, letting that sink in. But here's what I need you all to understand. My mother's manipulation doesn't absolve me. I chose to believe photographs over 3 years of faithful partnership. I chose to humiliate my mate publicly rather than have a private conversation. I chose cruelty over trust. Those were my choices. My sins. And Jamie Park nearly died because of them. Julian's voice cracked slightly. Bond sickness almost killed him. He spent weeks in an ICU in New York, his body shutting down because his alpha, the person who swore to protect him, systematically rejected and tortured him for crimes he didn't commit. And when he tried to explain, when he begged me to listen, I closed the curtains and walked away. The room had gone completely silent. I'm not here asking for forgiveness. I don't deserve it. I'm here to make 3 announcements. Julian straightened his shoulders. First, I'm establishing the Park Jamie Foundation for Omega Advocacy. $100 million in initial funding to provide legal defense, medical care, and support services for Omegas who've experienced bond abuse, discrimination, or wrongful termination. Every Omega whose contract was terminated after that viral video will receive full compensation and a formal apology. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Julian continued. Second, Kim Industries is implementing new corporate policies. No employee will face termination based on viral content or scandal without full investigation. No Omega employee will be paid less than their alpha or beta counterparts. And we're establishing an independent review board to investigate discrimination complaints, with real power to enforce consequences. He pulled out a document, held it up. Third, I'm transferring controlling interest of Kim Industries to a trust that includes Omega rights advocates on its board. I'll remain as CEO, but I'll no longer have unilateral power. My decisions will be reviewed. My biases will be checked. And if I ever abuse my position again, I can be removed. The room erupted. Journalists shouted questions. Business associates looked stunned. Julian raised his hand for silence. I'm doing this because money and apologies aren't enough. Jamie deserves to see actual change, systemic change that helps other Omegas avoid what he suffered. And I deserve to lose the unchecked power that let me destroy someone I loved. He paused, his eyes scanning the crowd until they landed on a figure standing in the back. Jamie. Julian's heart stopped. His Omega had come. Ethan stood beside him, Jamie's twin, his support, his family. Jamie's face was unreadable, but he was here. Listening. Jamie, Julian's voice softened. I know you're building a life here. I know you have people who treat you with the kindness I failed to show. I'm not asking you to come back to me. I'm not asking you to forgive me. I'm just asking you to know that I understand now, what I did, what I took from you, what I can never give back. Tears blurred Julian's vision. You told me that night that you loved me. That whatever I thought I saw, it wasn't true. That you swore on our bond you were innocent. And I didn't believe you. That's the sin I'll carry forever, not that I was manipulated, but that I chose not to trust you. The ballroom was dead silent now. You deserved an alpha who believed in you. Who protected you. Who chose you over pride and prejudice. I failed at every one of those things. Julian's voice broke completely. And if I spend the rest of my life trying to be worthy of the mate I destroyed, it still won't be enough. But I'm going to try anyway. Not to win you back, I don't deserve that, but because you deserved better then, and every Omega deserves better now. He stepped away from the podium, and the room erupted into chaos. Questions shouted. Cameras flashing. Business associates demanding explanations. But Julian only had eyes for Jamie. His Omega stood frozen in the back of the ballroom, tears streaming down his face. Ethan had an arm around his shoulders, steadying him. Marcus Chen, because of course that Alpha was here too, stood on Jamie's other side, protective but not possessive. Julian didn't approach. Didn't assume he had the right to Jamie's space. He just stood on the stage, hands at his sides, letting Jamie see him vulnerable. Broken. Changed. After what felt like hours, Jamie moved. Not toward Julian, toward the exit. But before he left, he looked back. Their eyes met across the ballroom, across the distance that couldn't be measured in mere feet. Julian saw something in Jamie's expression shift. Not forgiveness. Not reconciliation. But maybe, Acknowledgement that this gesture meant something. That Julian had finally understood the assignment. Then Jamie was gone, Marcus and Ethan flanking him, and Julian stood alone on a stage surrounded by chaos of his own making. His phone buzzed 30 minutes later. A text from an unknown number. Jamie, that foundation. Make sure it actually helps people. Make sure it's not just a publicity stunt to win me back. Because if you're using Omega suffering as a tool to manipulate me, I'll never forgive you. Julian's hands shook as he typed his response. Julian, I swear on everything, on our bond, on my life, on my honor, this isn't manipulation. You taught me that I had power to help or harm. I choose to help now. Whether you ever speak to me again or not. 3 dots appeared. Disappeared. Appeared again. Jamie, I'm having coffee with Marcus tomorrow at 10 a.m. Brew Haven in Brooklyn. If you want to talk, really talk, not apologize or grovel or manipulate, you can join us. But Marcus stays. And the second you make me uncomfortable, I'm leaving. Julian stared at the text, his heart hammering. Jamie was giving him a chance. Not a second chance at their relationship, a chance to prove he'd actually changed. To have a real conversation. With witnesses. With boundaries. With Jamie in complete control. Julian, I'll be there. Thank you. Jamie, don't thank me. Just show up as the alpha you should have been all along. Or don't show up at all. Julian looked around the ballroom, at the journalists still shouting questions, at the business associates demanding private meetings, at the chaos his announcement had created. None of it mattered. Jamie had given him one chance to prove that his grand gesture wasn't empty. One chance to sit across a table and have the conversation he should have had 3 months ago. Julian wouldn't waste it. This time, he'd listen. Julian arrived at Brew Haven 15 minutes early, his hands shaking as he ordered tea he wouldn't drink. The small Brooklyn cafe was everything the Grand Millennium Hotel wasn't. Worn wooden tables, mismatched chairs, local art on exposed brick walls, the smell of coffee and fresh pastries instead of champagne and designer perfume. A place where people came to be themselves, not to perform wealth and status. Jamie had built a life here. A real life, away from soul-suffocating hierarchies. At 9:58 a.m., the door chimed. Marcus entered first, his posture protective but not aggressive. Then Jamie, and Julian's breath caught despite 3 months of preparation. His Omega looked different. Stronger. The weight he'd lost had returned, filling out his frame properly. His silver blonde hair was longer, styled with casual confidence. He wore jeans and a soft green sweater that brought out the color in his eyes. But it was his expression that struck Julian most, guarded but not broken, cautious but not afraid. Jamie had survived him. Had thrived despite him. Julian, Jamie said quietly, sliding into the seat across from him. Marcus sat beside Jamie, a silent statement of allegiance. Thank you for coming, Julian said, then caught himself. Thank you for giving me this chance. I'm not giving you anything yet, Jamie corrected, his voice steady. I'm here to listen. That's all. Julian nodded, accepting the boundary. I know you've heard apologies. I know I've said I'm sorry 1,000 times. So I'm not going to start with that. I'm going to start with the truth you deserved 3 months ago. He took a breath, meeting Jamie's eyes directly. When my mother showed me those photos, I felt something break inside me. Not our bond, my ego. I'd been so proud of choosing you against my family's wishes, of proving that a Kim could bond with an Omega from nowhere and make it work. And when I saw those photos, I felt like a fool. Like everyone who'd warned me was right. Jamie's jaw tightened, but he stayed silent. I didn't investigate because I didn't want them to be fake, Julian continued, his voice raw. If they were fake, it meant I'd been wrong to doubt you. It meant my mother had manipulated me. It meant my prejudices, the ones I thought I'd overcome, were still controlling me. So I chose to believe the photos because believing them was easier than believing I was the problem. Easier, Jamie repeated, the single word heavy with pain. Easier, Julian confirmed. And cowardly. You stood in front of me, covered in wine, begging me to listen, swearing on our bond that you were innocent. And I looked at you, my mate, My Omega, the person I'd sworn to protect, and I chose pride over trust. That's the truth, Jamie. Not that I was manipulated. That I chose to be manipulated because it served my ego. Marcus's hand moved closer to Jamie's on the table, offering support. Jamie's fingers trembled slightly. The worst part, Julian continued, his voice breaking, is that you tried so hard to be worthy of me. You built your agency from nothing. You attended every family function even when my mother made you feel unwelcome. You bent yourself into impossible shapes trying to be the Omega they wanted. And I watched you do it, watched you sacrifice pieces of yourself, and I told myself it was because you loved me. Not because I was failing to protect you. You were, Jamie whispered. You were failing me every day, and I convinced myself it was my fault for not being enough. It was never your fault. Julian's hands clenched on the table. You were always enough. More than enough. I was the one who wasn't worthy. I let my mother's prejudices poison our bond. I let soul's hierarchies matter more than your heart. And when given the choice between trusting you or trusting evidence designed to confirm my worst fears, I chose wrong. Silence stretched between them. Marcus stayed quiet, witness to a reckoning 3 months overdue. I'm not asking you to come back to me, Julian said finally. I'm not asking you to forgive me or to give me another chance at our relationship. I'm just asking you to know that I understand now, what I took from you, what I can never give back, what you deserved then and deserve now. Jamie's eyes filled with tears. Do you know what the worst part was? Not the wine. Not the public humiliation. Not even the bond sickness. It was watching you parade other Omegas through soul and realizing you never saw me as irreplaceable. Just, replaceable. Interchangeable. Like any Omega with the right pedigree could fill the space I'd left. The words gutted Julian. You were never replaceable. Those Omegas, I wasn't courting them. I was punishing you. I wanted you to see that I could move on, that I didn't need you, that I was fine without the mate who'd betrayed me. He swallowed hard. It was cruelty disguised as strength. And you deserved none of it. No, Jamie agreed quietly. I didn't. Marcus cleared his throat gently. Jamie, you don't have to. I know. Jamie cut him off, but smiled gratefully. I know, Marcus. Thank you. He turned back to Julian, and for the first time since entering the cafe, his guard lowered fractionally. I'm not coming back to Seoul, Jamie said. I built something here. Something that's mine, that nobody can take away because their family disapproves or their mother manipulates them or their pride gets wounded. I have a job I'm good at. Friends who see me. A doctor, he glanced at Marcus with warmth, who helped me remember what respect looks like. Julian's chest constricted, but he nodded. You should stay here. You should have everything you've built. You should have Marcus, if that's what you want. Jamie's expression flickered with surprise. I mean it, Julian continued. He treats you the way I should have from the beginning. With kindness. With trust. With respect for your autonomy. If he makes you happy, Jamie, then that's what you deserve. Even if it kills me to watch. Marcus looked equally surprised, his protective posture softening slightly. Jamie was quiet for a long moment, tears streaming silently down his face. I don't know if I can ever trust you again, he finally whispered. The bond says you're my mate. But my heart remembers being destroyed. My body remembers collapsing in the rain. My mind remembers begging you to believe me while you closed the curtains and walked away. I know, Julian said. And I'm not asking you to trust me. I'm asking for permission to prove, over months, over years, however long it takes, that I can be worthy of even your friendship. No expectations. No demands. Just, let me try. Why? Jamie's voice cracked. Why now? Why does it matter now when it didn't matter then? Because losing you taught me what I should have known all along. Julian's vision blurred. That bonds don't make mates. Trust does. Respect does. Choosing each other every day, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard, that's what makes a mate. And I failed at all of it. But I want to learn. I want to be better. Not to win you back, Jamie. To honor what I destroyed. The cafe sounds faded, the hiss of the espresso machine, the murmur of other customers, the clink of cups on saucers. In that moment, only the three of them existed. Jamie between two alphas, holding both their futures in his scarred, beautiful hands. I need time, Jamie said finally. I need to figure out who I am without you. Who I want to be. What I want my life to look like. And I need to do that without you waiting in the wings, hoping I'll choose our bond over my healing. Take all the time you need, Julian said immediately. I'll be here. In New York or Seoul, wherever you want me. And if the answer ends up being nowhere near you, I'll accept that too. Jamie looked at Marcus, something unspoken passing between them. Marcus squeezed his hand gently, then stood. I'll give you two a moment, Marcus said quietly. Jamie, I'll be right outside if you need me. After Marcus left, Jamie stared at his coffee cup, gathering courage. The foundation, he said. The one you announced yesterday. If that's real, if it actually helps Omegas, then maybe we can start there. Not as mates. Not even as friends. As two people trying to do something good with the wreckage we made. Hope flared in Julian's chest, fragile and terrifying. I'd like that. But Julian? Jamie met his eyes, and Julian saw steel there that hadn't existed 3 months ago. I'm not the same Omega you destroyed. I'm not docile. I'm not going to make myself smaller to fit someone else's expectations. I'm not going to apologize for existing or for having a past you didn't protect me from. If you want any part of my life, even the smallest part, you accept all of me. As I am. Not as who you wish I was. I accept you, Julian said immediately. I see you, Jamie. Finally. And you're extraordinary. Jamie smiled, small and sad and somehow hopeful. We'll see. He stood, gathering his things. Julian stood too, instinct screaming at him to reach out, to touch, to claim. He kept his hands at his sides. Goodbye, Julian, Jamie said softly. Not goodbye forever. Not goodbye, it's over. Just, goodbye. Julian watched him leave, watched Marcus's arm slip protectively around his shoulders, watched his Omega walk into the October sunshine with his head held high. The bond in Julian's chest ached, but beneath the pain, something else stirred. Not hope exactly. More like, possibility. Jamie hadn't chosen him. But Jamie hadn't completely closed the door either. And for the alpha who'd destroyed everything, that microscopic chance was more than he deserved. Julian's phone buzzed as he left the cafe. Jamie, the Foundation's first board meeting is next month. If you're serious about this, about actually changing, then show up. Do the work. Prove it's not a gesture. Jamie, and Julian? Thank you for finally listening. It's 3 months too late. But it's something. Julian stood on a Brooklyn street corner, phone in hand, and allowed himself the smallest, most fragile hope. He'd lost Jamie. Maybe forever. Maybe not. But for the first time since Gate 24, Julian understood that loving someone meant letting them choose, even if they chose to walk away. Even if they chose someone else. Even if they chose themselves. And if Jamie's healing meant Julian spent the rest of his life as nothing more than a regretful memory and an ally in Omega advocacy, then that's what Jamie deserved. Julian Kim had finally learned what it meant to love someone more than he loved his own pride. 3 months too late. But perhaps, not too late to become the alpha Jamie deserved, even if he never got to be Jamie's alpha again. Epilogue note: 6 months later, Julian and Jamie worked together on the Foundation, slowly rebuilding trust. Marcus remains a close friend to Jamie, having gracefully accepted that Jamie needed to heal before choosing anyone. The bond remains, damaged but healing. Whether Jamie and Julian find their way back to each other, or whether Jamie chooses a different future entirely, is a story for another time. What matters is that Jamie chose himself first, and that choice saved them both.